If you think you've seen how fast a quiet night can turn into tragedy, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and keep watching because what happened on a single street in Rancho Cucamonga changed an entire community forever. The evening of October 27, 2025, began like any other in Southern California. Suburban stillness, flickering streetlights, families settling in. Rancho Cucamonga is the kind of place people call safe, almost sheltered from big city chaos. Single-story homes, quiet cul-de-sacs, children's bikes resting on lawns. Most nights feel predictable. But not this one. Around 7:30 p.m., a domestic violence call came into the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Dispatch Center. The address, the 12300 block of Hollyhock Drive. The report involved a man and a woman in a heated disturbance. Domestic violence calls are among the most unpredictable and dangerous for law enforcement, and deputies know even a routine one can shift instantly. Among those responding was 28-year-old Deputy Andrew Nunez, a 6-year veteran known for professionalism and calm under pressure. Colleagues respected him deeply. Earlier that year, the department had highlighted his commitment to protecting families and vulnerable victims. He had a wife, a 2-year-old daughter, and another child on the way. His shift had started like any other, nothing to hint it would be his last. He was dispatched to Hollyhock Drive. The neighborhood was peaceful, well-kept, and quiet. Residents later said nothing felt unusual before the lights arrived, before the stillness shattered. That detail became part of the timeline, the silence before the violence. When Deputy Nunez approached the residence, he followed standard procedure. Inside was 47-year-old Angelo Jose Saldivar of San Bernardino, who had reportedly been involved in a heated dispute. What happened next was fast, so fast investigators later described it as abrupt and without warning. The suspect opened fire. Deputy Nunez was struck in the head. The entire encounter lasted seconds, too quick for defense, retreat, or reaction. Reports later described it as a devastating ambush. Other deputies arrived moments later. Life-saving efforts began immediately. Patrol lights filled the street as firefighters and medics fought to stabilize the wounded deputy. Neighbors stepped outside in disbelief, watching their quiet evening dissolve into chaos. Deputy Nunez was rushed to a hospital in critical condition but later died from his injuries. News spread through the department instantly. Radios went quiet. Deputies across the region received the update with shock. The department called the loss devastating, noting how a call he had answered like thousands before had turned fatal in moments. But the danger wasn't over. Saldivar fled the scene on a motorcycle, escaping as deputies focused on rescue efforts. What began as a domestic violence call became a region-wide manhunt. Agencies coordinated air support, ground units, and freeway containment. The suspect was armed and extremely dangerous. The pursuit escalated onto the 210 freeway, with Saldivar reportedly reaching speeds near or above 150 miles per hour. This became one of the defining moments of the night, a high-speed flight through the Inland Empire, flashing patrol lights cutting through the dark. Drivers later recalled patrol units weaving through traffic as the suspect darted dangerously between lanes. High-speed chases involve enormous risk, but in this case the suspect had already shot a deputy. Stopping him became a priority. In a development later widely discussed, an off-duty deputy witnessed the pursuit and made a split-second decision. According to official reports, he struck the suspect's motorcycle, causing a crash near Campus Avenue in Upland. The intervention ended the chase but triggered a parallel review to determine whether protocol had been followed. Saldivar, seriously injured, was taken into custody and transported to a hospital under guard. The investigation into his actions, and the events leading to Deputy Nunez's death, was just beginning. Back on Hollyhock Drive, investigators worked late into the night, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and reconstructing the sequence of events. Domestic violence cases often involve complicated personal histories, but in this case, the priority was establishing the moments that led to the fatal ambush. Within hours, the sheriff's department publicly confirmed Deputy Nunez's death. The statement emphasized his service, dedication, and the deep sense of loss felt by fellow deputies and residents. The story spread across Southern California, and by morning, it was national news. As the sun rose on October 28, the community was forever changed. Patrol units flew flags at half-mast. Blue ribbons appeared on fences and mailboxes. Residents gathered for vigils, holding candles and offering prayers for the deputy's family. But even as the emotional impact settled over the region, the legal process was unfolding. The suspect was alive, in custody, and facing the full weight of the justice system. And soon, the district attorney would reveal charges that showed the true scope of what happened on that once quiet street. The sun had barely set over the Inland Empire when the full scope of the tragedy set in. As the neighborhood around Hollyhock Drive lay under the quiet aftershock of violence, law enforcement across the region shifted into full gear. The killing of Andrew Nunez had transformed a domestic disturbance call into a full-scale homicide investigation. In the hours following the shooting, investigators from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department assumed control of the scene. The home on the 12300 block of Hollyhock Drive and the surrounding area were sealed off. Evidence markers stood by shattered glass and shell casings. Forensic teams photographed, documented, and collected material under the halo of street lamps and patrol car lights. Though the walls did not speak, the trajectory of the investigation traced the steps of those involved: victim, suspect, and the fleeing path that would lead across multiple jurisdictions. Investigators quickly turned their attention to the suspect, Angelo Jose Saldivar, 47 years old, of San Bernardino. Authorities confirmed his identity within days of the incident. San Bernardino County District Attorney. +3. NBC Los Angeles. +3. +3. Saldivar was known to have been involved in the earlier domestic violence dispute at the residence, and when deputies arrived, the sequence turned lethal. As night deepened, the manhunt extended into freeway lanes, traffic lanes, and across county lines. On the eastbound lanes of the Interstate 210, the high-speed pursuit became the defining symbol of that day's terror. According to law enforcement accounts, Saldivar raced at speeds reaching approximately 150 miles per hour. KFI AM 640. +1. The roar of motorcycles, pursuit cars, and police sirens echoed across lanes, weaving through traffic, putting both officers and civilians at risk. The chase would not end until one decisive intervention. That intervention came in the form of an off-duty deputy. In an unmarked vehicle, the officer moved into the path of Saldivar's motorcycle and executed what authorities later described as a legal intervention. Police 1. The motorcycle crashed near the Campus Avenue exit in Upland, and Saldivar was taken into custody soon afterward. The scene of the crash, flashing lights, skid marks, a mangled bike, became the next chapter in the investigation. The suspect was transported to hospital, injured but alive, and the wheels of the criminal justice system began to turn. Less than a week later, on November 3, 2025, the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office officially filed charges. San Bernardino County District Attorney. +2. +2. Saldivar faced a sweeping array of felony counts that laid bare the gravity of his alleged crimes. Murder, PC 187A, for the killing of Deputy Nunez. +1. Attempted kidnapping, PC 207A, stemming from the earlier domestic violence incident. SBCSentinel.com. +1. 4 counts of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, PC 245B. +1. Discharge of a firearm, PC 246.3A. SBCSentinel.com. Evading an officer, VC 2800.2A. False imprisonment by violence, PC 236. SBCSentinel.com. Battery on a spouse, PC 243E. 1. SBCSentinel.com. In addition to these counts, prosecutors alleged special circumstances: the murder of a peace officer in the performance of his duties, intentional discharge of a firearm, and murder to avoid arrest. These enhancements mean Saldivar could face life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty if convicted. But, +1. The formal complaint marked this case among the most severe the county had seen. As the legal process began, public statements underscored the tragedy. The Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney framed the killing not as a single event, but as a moment that rippled through communities of law enforcement, family, and society. Investigators continued to comb through evidence: interviews with witnesses who reported the earlier domestic incident, graphic mapping of the pursuit, and analysis of the ballistic evidence that killed Deputy Nunez. While a full court trial lay ahead, the case had already taken on symbolic weight, the danger inherent in the simplest call for help. What began as a man threatening a woman had escalated into the loss of a public servant and a multi-agency manhunt. In the meantime, the family of Deputy Nunez faced a new reality. A wife mourning a husband, a toddler missing her father's laughter, another child yet unborn. The community held vigils. Flags flew at half-staff. Donations poured in for the deputy's family. The headlines carried not only the event, but the human ripple effect of violence. At the same time, questions lingered in the background. How did the suspect manage to flee at such speed? When did the off-duty intervention occur, and was it reviewed in real time? What additional charges might emerge? And as the courtroom gears began to turn, investigators prepared for months of discovery, motions, and far-reaching implications. Yet through all this, the shooter sat in custody, awaiting his next court appearance. The investigation had shifted from scene to courtroom, from chase to case file. But for those who knew Deputy Nunez, the emptiness left by his absence remained. A uniformed silhouette missing from roll call. A patrol car parked with an empty seat. A community unsettled. Chapter 2 ends as the suspect is formally charged, his fate yet to be decided, the trial yet to unfold, and the investigation moves into its next phase. What comes next will test the system, challenge assumptions, and bring us ever closer to the truth of what happened that day. As the orange afternoon light faded over the foothills of Rancho Cucamonga, investigators from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and allied agencies began what would become a deep and far-reaching effort to piece together the moment-by-moment chain of events that led to the fatal shooting of Andrew Nunez. The case no longer rested simply on a tragic death. It had escalated into a full homicide investigation, a manhunt, and a high-stakes criminal prosecution. The house on the 12300 block of Hollyhock Drive sat behind police tape and plastic evidence tents. 4 hours, forensic teams photographed the front facade, the nearby shrubs, and the parking lot where deputies had responded. Shell casings, bloodstains, and officer footprints were documented by investigators who worked through the evening under bright lights and cooling air. Friends, neighbors, and the community watched quietly, stunned by how a familiar suburban block had become a crime scene. According to the department, those responding were met with gunfire almost immediately upon arrival. International Business Times UK +2 ABC 7 Los Angeles +2. Detectives focused early on the suspect, Angelo Jose Saldivar, age 47, of San Bernardino. Public records showed his identity was confirmed quickly, and authorities indicated he was involved in the preceding domestic violence incident that prompted the call. Yahoo +2 Calcoast Times +2 investigators thus treated the scene as not just a shooting scene, but as the culmination of an escalating domestic dispute. In parallel, law enforcement agencies turned their attention to the high-speed freeway chase. Analysts reviewed hours of dashcam video, aerial footage from the California Highway Patrol, and witness statements. Reports described speeds reaching in excess of 150 miles per hour. KCRA +2 Calcoast Times +2 One key moment. An off-duty deputy drove an unmarked vehicle and executed a so-called legal intervention by striking the fleeing motorcycle near the Campus Avenue exit on the 210 freeway, effectively ending the pursuit. ABC 7 Los Angeles +1 That sudden turn in the chase would prompt hours of review. How was the suspect able to accelerate so quickly? Why did the intervention happen where it did? And what safeguards were in place for public safety? Meanwhile, official statements announced the grief that echoed through the community. The sheriff described Deputy Nunez as a wonderful father and a wonderful deputy sheriff, noting his 6 years of service and that he leaves behind a 2-year-old daughter and a pregnant wife. ABC 7 Los Angeles +1 The mayor's office, local faith leaders and community organizations held vigils. At the substation of the Rancho Cucamonga division, hundreds gathered in the early evening, placing flowers, candles, and blue ribbons, signals of a community in mourning. ABC 7 Los Angeles +1. As layers of the case unfolded, investigators revealed that the domestic violence origin of the call had profound implications. Analysts pointed out the statistical danger of such calls. In California and nationwide, officers responding to domestic disputes face significantly higher risk of violence than many other types of calls. Calcoast Times +1 This framing became part of the narrative, that a routine call, when risk factors aligned, can become fatal in mere seconds. For the prosecution, the investigation advanced from scene to courtroom. On November 3, the district attorney's office filed a broad array of charges against Saldivar, including murder, attempted kidnapping, assault with a semi-automatic firearm, discharging a firearm with gross negligence, evading officers, false imprisonment, and domestic battery. Yahoo +1 The inclusion of special circumstance enhancements, murder of a peace officer, murder to avoid arrest, underscored the severity. The suspect now faced the possibility of life without parole or even the death penalty. Yow. That charge sheet shifted the investigation outward. Detectives now sought to trace Saldivar's path, explore his weapons, examine the motorcycle, canvass neighbors for earlier signs of trouble, and review the police response from the first moments. Did deputies have the necessary protective gear? Was there a cover position? What triggered the gunfire within seconds of arrival? These questions began circulating in internal review. Although no official fault or liability had been publicly announced, the department stated that an internal affairs team would assist in its examination of procedures and training. Calcos Times+1. At the same time, the public narrative evolved. Community forums, local media segments, and law enforcement briefings emphasized not only the heroism of Deputy Nunez, but the growing awareness that even in suburban spaces, violence lies close to the surface. Residents learned that the 12300 block of Halahawk Drive was not immune to threatening behavior, and the presence of armed suspects even their challenged assumptions about safe neighborhoods. There were moments of raw emotion. At the vigil outside the substation, a colleague of Nunez spoke with quiet voice, "Everything I do, now it's going to be for Andrew." ABC7 Los Angeles. Others recalled his kindness, giving a neighborhood kid a ride home once, offering support to a victim of identity theft, showing up day after day to protect even unseen residents. But central to the unfolding chapter was the work still ahead. Forensic labs must analyze ballistic trajectories. The pursuit video must be logged. The motorcycle must be examined. Witnesses must be re-interviewed. Lawyers must examine evidence packages. The investigation was no longer in the fast-moving phase of chase and capture. It had settled into the slower, forensic and procedural phase where every detail matters. The stakes were highest because a life had been lost, a family shattered, and the community demanded answers. The San Bernardino courthouse is built from steel, glass, and sharp geometry, a place designed to contain conflict. Its halls echo with thousands of past cases. But on the morning the suspect in the killing of Deputy Andrew Nunez appeared for his first major hearings, the building carried a heavier atmosphere. Security was tightened. Deputies lined the perimeter. Court staff moved with a quiet urgency. The killing of a law enforcement officer always triggers a strong institutional reaction, and with Deputy Nunez described as a devoted father and respected deputy, tension felt especially sharp. The suspect, 47-year-old Angelo Jose Saldivar, entered wearing a medical brace, injuries from the motorcycle crash still visible. His hands were restrained. The courtroom went silent as he was brought in. Families from both sides attended, seated apart. Rows behind the prosecution were filled with deputies there to honor Nunez. Here the criminal case formally began taking shape. The district attorney filed extensive charges, including murder of a peace officer, special circumstance murder to avoid arrest, assault with a semi-automatic firearm, negligent discharge, felony evading, domestic battery, and false imprisonment tied to the original domestic violence call. The charges were severe and reflected both the deputy's death and the danger to the community during the suspect's flight. In California, special circumstance allegations allow prosecutors to pursue life without parole or the death penalty. No penalty decision was announced yet, but the stakes were clear. The courtroom felt heavy with that reality. Prosecutors outlined the timeline: the domestic violence report, the deputy's arrival, the sudden gunfire, Nunez's fatal head wound, the escape on a motorcycle, the 150 miles per hour pursuit, and the off-duty deputy's intervention that ended it. Journalists noted that each detail aligned with publicly verified reporting. What made the case complex wasn't confusion, it was the sheer amount of evidence and events. The defense, appointed due to the seriousness of the charges, focused on procedural matters: medical evaluations, evidence access, and time to review the large discovery file. There were no emotional outbursts or dramatic claims. Early phases of cases like this rarely involve theatrics. Meanwhile, investigators continued building an extensive evidentiary foundation. Ballistics experts examined the firearm from the residence. Analysts reviewed shell casings, bullet trajectories, and impact patterns. Body cam and dashcam footage was synchronized to pinpoint the exact moment of gunfire. Video from the 210 freeway pursuit was reconstructed frame by frame. Because an off-duty deputy intervened, an internal review was launched, standard procedure whenever force or a collision occurs. Prosecutors interviewed first responders who attempted to save Deputy Nunez. Medical personnel documented their timeline. Detectives collected statements from neighbors on Halahawk Drive to understand the full context of the domestic violence situation. Even if the shooting itself was straightforward, prosecutors needed a complete picture. Outside the courthouse, memorials for Nunez continued to grow. People left flowers and handwritten notes. A donation kiosk supported his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and the unborn child he would never meet. Photos of him smiling in uniform circulated widely. The courtroom proceedings were inseparable from the human loss felt community-wide. But the legal system moves slowly. The judge scheduled preliminary hearing dates. Agencies submitted reports. The defense indicated it would examine details of the pursuit and the crash. Prosecutors focused on proving the shooting was intentional, unprovoked, and directed at a deputy responding to a domestic violence crisis. Retired deputies who had known Nunez spoke to local media about his professionalism, steady presence, and respect for victims. The department called him a wonderful father and a wonderful deputy. The courtroom became a place not just for legal process but for collective mourning. Legal experts noted that cases involving murdered peace officers follow strict frameworks. Prosecutors must prove intent and justify special circumstance enhancements. The domestic violence context, the weapon, the fatal injury, the pursuit, all required airtight evidence. Early signs indicated prosecutors were confident. For Nunez's family, the courtroom was both a place of grief and the first step toward justice. His wife, carrying their unborn child, attended key hearings with silent strength, supported by deputies standing beside her. Her presence spoke volumes. When the hearing ended, deputies escorted Saldivar out. The Nunez family departed through a private exit. Prosecutors organized files. The defense prepared motions. Reporters filed updates. The machinery of justice continued, steady even under the weight of tragedy. But beyond the legal battle, another dimension was unfolding: community impact, internal reviews, and departmental reassessment. The death of Deputy Nunez forced agencies statewide to revisit officer safety protocols, especially for domestic violence calls, among the most volatile and dangerous. Experts emphasized how quickly emotions in these environments can escalate into violence. Discussions grew about protective equipment, approach tactics, and training resources. Yet despite all the analysis, one truth remained: nothing could undo the loss suffered on Hollyhock Drive. The days following the death of Deputy Andrew Nunez moved slowly for the people who knew him and shockingly fast for the world that watched. The incident on Hollyhock Drive was no longer just a police call gone tragically wrong. It had become a statewide conversation, a courtroom process, a departmental evaluation, and a moment that forced both civilians and law enforcement agencies to confront the fragile line between routine service and sudden danger. Across Rancho Cucamonga, the signs of mourning spread with quiet determination. Blue ribbons appeared on mailboxes, fences, and storefronts. Patrol vehicles were seen with black mourning bands stretched across their badges. And at the Rancho Cucamonga substation, where Deputy Nunez had spent his 6 years of service, the memorial that began as a few candles grew into a field of flowers, photographs, handwritten notes, and folded flags. According to news reports, hundreds came forward to honor him, many of whom had never met him but felt the weight of the loss. The department described him repeatedly as a devoted father, a respected deputy, and a quiet professional whose presence steadying both colleagues and civilians during difficult calls. In the weeks that followed, the Sheriff's Department conducted its internal review, standard procedure in any case involving the use of force, officer injury, or high-speed pursuit. The review was not an evaluation of guilt or innocence in the shooting, but rather a methodical examination of how deputies approached the domestic violence call, how quickly events escalated, and how the subsequent 150 miles per hour pursuit unfolded on the 210 freeway. Agencies across California paid attention, acknowledging that the incident reflected a broader, well-known reality. Domestic violence calls remain among the most dangerous encounters for law enforcement. Statewide discussions grew about approach techniques, early de-escalation opportunities, and the unpredictable nature of tense household environments. The high-speed pursuit itself, already documented in multiple news reports, became part of a larger conversation. Analysts discussed the tremendous speed, the risk to the public, and the intervention executed by the off-duty deputy that ultimately forced the motorcycle to crash near the Campus Avenue exit. While officials affirmed the move stopped a dangerous and rapidly evolving threat, the situation also underscored the complexities of pursuing an armed suspect who refuses to stop, especially across heavily trafficked freeways. Meanwhile, Deputy Nunez's family navigated a grief that no public statement could soften. His wife, expecting their second child, became the emotional center of the community's support efforts. Fundraisers were organized across Southern California, including verified law enforcement charity networks. Department members took shifts delivering meals, checking in, and quietly providing what comfort they could. Their daughter, only 2 years old, was too young to understand the loss, but the community vowed that when she grew older she would know the remarkable service and character of her father. The criminal case proceeded in deliberate stages. The suspect faced charges that included murder of a peace officer, special circumstances for killing to avoid arrest, assault with a semi-automatic firearm, domestic violence, related offenses, and felony evading. Legal experts noted that the special circumstance charges meant prosecutors could seek life without parole or the death penalty. Court hearings drew continued attention. Each appearance brought updates, discovery exchanges, procedural motions, medical evaluations, and scheduling for future evidentiary hearings. No grand revelations emerged, only the steady, structured advance of a homicide case involving the death of a deputy. For fellow deputies, life at the station took on a new rhythm. Roll calls carried a moment of silence. Patrols moved with heightened alertness. Training officers held impromptu refreshers on tactical positioning during domestic violence responses. Young deputies asked questions, looking for understanding in a profession where danger can materialize in seconds. Senior deputies responded with honesty. Sometimes there is no perfect explanation. Sometimes the moment just breaks the wrong way. But there was also a shared promise that Nunez's dedication and professionalism would guide how they responded moving forward. The incident prompted broader discussions across California and beyond. News outlets revisited statistics on officer fatalities, the prevalence of firearms during domestic disputes, and the need for reinforced training for crisis responses. Families affected by similar tragedies reached out publicly, offering condolences and emphasizing the shared experience of sudden loss. Meanwhile, domestic violence advocacy organizations reminded the public that behind many emergency calls are individuals experiencing real, ongoing harm, victims whose safety depends on deputies like Nunez. Yet even amid the institutional reflection and legislative conversations, the heart of this case remained grounded in personal tragedy. Deputy Andrew Nunez had built his life around service, family, and a commitment to protecting his community. His colleagues remembered him as reliable, passionate, and deeply family-oriented. His wife remembered him as a loving husband and the father of a toddler who adored him. His parents remembered the boy who wanted to serve others before he ever wore a uniform. And a department remembered the partner who would no longer return to roll call. At regional law enforcement memorials, Nunez's name was added to the lists of fallen officers, etched into walls of granite, spoken aloud at candlelight ceremonies, and carried in honor walks by fellow deputies. These acts did not lessen the grief, but they preserved his legacy among those who choose a path of service knowing its risks. As time moved forward, community support continued. The story of Deputy Nunez was shared during academy classes, at department briefings, and in public safety meetings across the county. His death served as a reminder of the stakes involved every time law enforcement answers a call. But beyond institutional lessons, there was the human lesson, one reflected in the quiet spaces where grief settles. A reminder of fragility, courage, and the unpredictability of the world deputies step into every day. The courthouse, still holding the weight of the case, prepared for the long process ahead. Trials in homicide cases, especially those involving peace officers, can stretch across months or years. Evidence would be introduced, witnesses would testify, arguments would be made, and ultimately, a jury would carry the responsibility of delivering a verdict. For the community, healing would be gradual. Trauma has its own timeline. Families marked anniversaries, deputies returned to duty, and residents of Hollyhock Drive tried to reclaim the quiet of their neighborhood. Some things would return to normal. Others would not. But one truth endured. The legacy of Deputy Andrew Nunez extended far beyond the events of that October day. It lived in the actions of his colleagues, in the lessons learned across the department, in the public's renewed understanding of the risks deputies face, and most of all, in the family he left behind. Justice would continue unfolding in the courts. The community would continue mourning. And California would remember the deputy who responded to a call with the professionalism and courage he brought to every shift, and paid the ultimate price.